bitch. And since there is not a lot of news, we normally cover, the biggest news coming up. There's not a lot. So to wrap up the year, we are going to give you each of our top 5 movies of 2020. So with that, let's get started. Hey there, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Just ready to run through these top 5. There's some, even with the pandemic and things getting delayed and pushed back and canceled, still a lot of good movies to talk about.
Yeah, there are. It's definitely not been, a master year, but when I was looking, I found, I had to narrow it down to 5. There's definitely been more than 5 really good ones. Well, why don't we just jump into it? You want to give us your first one?
Sure. Started my number 5 came out on Hulu a few months ago. Palm Springs, with Andy Samberg, of Lonely Island fame, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Kristen Milioti is the female lead. You might know her from How I Met Your Mother as the titular mother. They are guests at a wedding in aforementioned Palm Springs, and they get stuck in a time loop. And it's a romantic comedy, but it's kind of a fantasy romantic comedy. It's a fun, unique spin on the genre. I mean, the traditional rom-coms, they are what they are at this point. You can pinpoint minute by minute what's going to happen in their 90, 100-minute runtime.
Right,
and
yeah.
it still hits those beats. But it's it's a comfort genre. It's tried and true. They keep the same beats for a reason. But with the time loop, they play around. They have a little more fun than the traditional movies may not be able to kind of dive into. And it's really well acted. There's some really good drama involved in it too. And it's really just a vehicle for those two to just play off each other really well. Their chemistry, they knock it out of the park. J.K. Simmons comes in for a little bit. He's still got his fastball, of course, as kind of a little bit of a crazy guy. And it's just a really, really fun time, really well made. I loved it.
Yeah, I agree. I saw this one too. I watched it twice because I really liked it. I watched it the first time alone. Second time I watched it with my fiance, and she really liked it too. But I went into this having heard good things, but knowing nothing about it. Didn't know the plot, didn't watch a trailer. And so those first, 20 minutes, I was like, what is going on? Like, I didn't know. And when J.K. Simmons popped up as that, crazy madman, it was like a perfect intro for him, especially because I didn't know he was going to be in it. But yeah, dude, I definitely agree. Their chemistry was awesome. Like, I really believed that these two were there together and working through this thing together, and they really made it pop. I agree. It's a good pick.
All right.
Ernesto's asking what the movie is. He might have come in late. It was Palm Springs. It's on Hulu.
Yep.
You got anything to add to it?
I think we both said it all. Let's move on to your number 5.
All right, so I have here, it's a French movie, so I'll probably say the title wrong, but it is Les Miserables, and it is not based on the Victor Hugo book that, that name is always associated with. It's not a musical. It's not, one of the musical movies or play adaptations that there's been numerous of. This is a realistic, gritty police drama. It's kind of in the vein of what a lot of people here will know, Training Day with Denzel Washington, where it is an officer who's assigned to a new bureau, and he's assigned to a new task force, an anti-crime task force. And he is a moral, upstanding person, but what he realizes with the people he gets assigned to, they are abusing their powers, and the people who are training him are not people that he can trust or relate to. So then he's kind of torn in the middle about what to do and what's right. So they are policing. It's a kind of a low-income little borough in France. It takes place in 2018, right after France won the FIFA World Cup, and so there's a bunch of excitement, and there was a bunch of partying and stuff going on, and it's really gritty, entertaining throughout, and it was super realistic. One of the best cop dramas I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that's not one that I've caught, but everything I've heard about it has been kind of along what you're saying, that it's just great. And if you bring in a Training Day comparison, I'm sold.
Right.
Great. Yeah. Denzel just had his birthday a day or two ago. Probably my favorite actor of all time, has been for a couple decades. So if you're bringing in one of his best movies and one of his best roles as a decent comp, then I'm all in. That's one that I need to get checked off the
Oh
watch
yeah,
list.
definitely, dude. If you liked Training Day, it's the same basic, premise. He's the Ethan Hawke character, and his trainer is the guy who runs, this group, who runs the anti-crime task force, and so he's pressured under this guy who's his boss, who's showing him the ropes, but also is just like not okay with the way he abuses his power and the way he treats the people, and doesn't do things exactly legally.
And is that one streaming anywhere?
Oh, yes. Actually, I wrote this stuff down. I'm glad you asked. It is streaming on Prime, and also Rotten Tomato scores. I wrote them down if anybody cares. The critics gave this an 80 and audience, or an 88, and the audience is an 88 as well. Critics and audiences both agreed. 88%. Good score.
Very nice.
So let's move on now. What else you got for us?
All right, coming in at my number 4 is a recent movie just a week ago, Soul, the new Pixar movie. As a kid growing up on Toy Story, Monsters Inc., all those movies, even as a grown adult, these movies are straight up my alley. And Soul is actually maybe the most adult movie that they've made. I've heard a lot, and I'd probably agree with this. I don't have young kids, but what I've heard is that younger kids maybe can't follow the story or the themes as well as they maybe can, but it's still got that cartoon fun, still got the jokes. It's really funny. So for those who maybe aren't familiar, a musician, Joe, voiced by Jamie Foxx. The voice cast is excellent, by the way. It's got Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey.
Oh, I didn't even know Jamie Foxx was in it.
He's the lead there. Jamie Foxx, Tina Fey, Graham Norton, Felicia Rashad, Donnell Rawlings. It's stacked. And he dies or almost dies, and he goes to the great beyond, they call it. And he's not ready to give up on his life yet. So he gets paired up with 22. It's just a soul. They didn't give him their numbers, and they kind of form a bond, and won't say much more than that because there are a few unexpected parts that I didn't know was coming. But it's Pixar. They don't miss. They've got a few strikes on their record, on their stat sheet. But for the most part, if it's got the Pixar name on it, it's going to crush. It's got maybe the single funniest joke of the year. It's just an uncalled for ricochet shot at the New York Knicks. Won't spoil it, but it's phenomenal. It was going all over Twitter Christmas Day and the day after. I don't think anybody knew that joke was coming. It wasn't in the trailers, and it's just kind of a throwaway joke that blink and you miss it. I actually did miss it the first time. I had to go back and rewind it and find the scene again. But it's incredible. It's very touching, heartfelt, emotional. A lot of themes that people can connect to. There's a point where he says, "I didn't want to die and have my life mean nothing." And anyone who's questioned their place in life or their career calling, their personal life, whatever, can connect to that to some degree. And Pixar's got that down to a science, and that's not a bad thing. They know what they're doing. They know how to hit you on the inner feels. So if you haven't checked that one out, definitely give it a shot. Obviously on Disney Plus, not behind a premium paywall like they did with Mulan. If you have Disney Plus, you've got Soul, and it's a big time recommend.
So what's your favorite Pixar movie then? Just kind of give us like a scale here.
Favorite?
Toy
Story is kind of the original one. That was, I think, 1995. I was 5 years old. That was tailor-made for me. So can't go wrong with Toy Story. I'd have to probably put that as my favorite.
I remember getting Toy Story on VHS for my birthday when it first came out from my grandma. And then, I was sold after that. So, okay. I haven't seen Soul yet, but I'm going to check it out. So we will now move on to my next pick. It's much probably darker than that one. This one is called The Lodge, and it is a psychological horror thriller kind of movie. It's really good. It takes place in the stereotypical setting of a remote cabin. It's a little bit cliche, but this one hones it in. It's not in the woods. It's out, in the middle of the snow. And the plot is a father takes his 2 kids. He's got a young boy, young girl, and his new girlfriend out into this cabin for a night for a little retreat. He's going to try and get the kids to warm up to the new girlfriend. They don't like the new girlfriend. They, of course, want their mom. They don't want the girlfriend around. But while he's there, something comes up and he has to take off. There's an emergency, so he leaves. And she's stuck there having no idea how to deal with these 2 kids who hate her, and she's trying to win them over. And they get trapped in by a storm. And the longer that they're there, nobody's coming. And it seems like they're there for a really long time. They can't communicate with anybody. And as things go on, she starts to lose her sanity a little bit, and it turns into an unraveling. She starts to think that everybody's there is dead. There's signs that they're dead. They're in some sort of purgatory. And it's like a mystery unfolding from there. Where are they? Why are they there? And how do they get out of it? And it was done really well. It has everybody's 90s crush. Alicia Silverstone is in it. She doesn't play a leading role, but she has an appearance, a small role. And then it has Jaden Martell. He played Bill, the lead from the It movies. You can see him there in the trailer. He plays the young son. But the cast was great. And even if you don't like horrors, it's lighter on the horror than it is the mystery thriller, just kind of like getting under your skin and pushing your nerves. So if you're into those type of movies, I would highly recommend this one. It is available to watch on Hulu, and you should check it out.
All right. And is it classic horror, not very long, just gets to the point?
Yeah, it's not super long, if I recall, maybe a little over an hour and a half.
Yeah, they've got that nailed down. Good horror movies seem to be hour 40, typically, or hour and a half, hour 40 or so. Then they don't lean too much into the jump scares in that one, or
no? See, I lean away from jump scares. Like I was saying, last time I talked to you, I like a good movie that is a slow burn that really starts to make you feel uneasy as you're watching it. If something's jumping out every 2 seconds and just screaming, you can scare anybody by jumping at the screen and making the music escalate. This is not one of those movies that follows those cheap jump scares. It really tries to unwind the sanity of the characters and bring you with it, like trying to figure out what's going on and kind of getting more and more uncomfortable as it goes on.
Nice. Sounds intense. Like a good call.
Good stuff.
All right. Coming in at my number 3 is a Danish film, Another Round. This one stars Mads Mikkelsen of James Bond, the She fame, upcoming Fantastic Beasts, taking over the role of Grindelwald. This one it's kind of a goofy premise. So Mikkelsen is a high school teacher, and along with his 3 other teacher friends, they're all in various stages of midlife crises. Nothing original there, but it plays past that perfectly fine. Right. And they decided to test a theory that a Danish philosopher had put forth, that your life will be better if you always have a blood alcohol level of 0.05. The philosopher says that the human body is born with a 0.05% deficiency, and that to live your best life, you should always have that, maybe a slight buzz, if you want to call it that, going at all times. So the 4 of them, they start drinking at work. They set parameters. Like Hemingway, they say you can only drink between certain hours, not on the weekends. And it's honestly just a ton of fun. It hits a few predictable endpoints, but if you're about the journey over the destination, I mean, the journey is a blast. And Mads Mikkelsen gives maybe my favorite performance of the year. If you're watching live with us now, you can see the trailer playing. He's just out there having a great time, being more lively. And the final scene of this movie, I'm not going to say anything about what it is, obviously, but the final scene is maybe my single favorite scene of any movie this year. Watched it again last night. It's just phenomenal. The music's perfect. The actors, the whole scene is just fantastic. It's not the most moving and the most powerful, but it's perfect for me. And Mads Mikkelsen is fantastic in this role. Everyone is good, but he is fantastic. And I'm glad to see you had a foreign film on your list too. I think you might have one more coming up. I've got this one. I think foreign films, they don't really get enough credit here in the States. I don't think.
Definitely.
And if you watch the Oscars last year, and he won when Bong Joon-ho won for one of his Oscars, and he said, if you can overcome that 1-inch barrier of subtitles, you're opening yourself up to whole new worlds of creativity and ideas and movies. And, you've got to read a little bit, but there's so many good foreign films out there. And if you and I tonight can get people, convince them even just a little bit to look into what else is out there, there's just infinite amount of movies.
You're absolutely right. And I love Bong Joon-ho, one of my favorite filmmakers. I have loved every single thing he's put out now. Super psyched for Parasite to do so well. I thought there was no chance it was going to win Best Picture, especially after it won Best Foreign Film. I was like, well, they can't let him win both. I just don't see that. And he swept it, man. He took so much. So
I stood up and screamed when they won Best Picture. It was amazing. That movie is perfect to me. Yeah. I love it. And
I was able to catch that in theaters. Luckily,
he's just a boss. He's so cool. Just in all the award show lead ups and the interviews. Bong Joon-ho. I'll always find time to plug my guy Bong Joon-ho. Yeah. Parasite's great. Snowpiercer, Memories of Murder. Check it out if you get a chance.
He's got there's so many good ones. But just to close out real quick on it was another round, right?
Yep.
Mads Mikkelsen, I absolutely love him. This one was on my list. I keep seeing the poster pop up, and it's just him, smiling, like taking a drink. And so I'm excited to see him in a more like laid back, happy role. He's always in such serious things. So this, I'm excited to see this.
That definitely had something to do with it. That you think Mads Mikkelsen, you think villain, scary, intense guy, right? And obviously with the topic, you can see that there's going to be some more serious parts of it, but for the most part, he's laid back, like you said, and he's just having a blast with it. It looks like. All
right, well, I'm definitely going to catch that one. Is that one streaming on anything, or you got to rent it?
Not right now. It's not super new or super old. I'm sorry, it's not super old. Yeah. So right now it is only available to rent.
Okay. Well, we can move on to my next pick. I have Bill and Ted Face the Music, and I'm primarily going with this one just because it was so much fun, and it was much better than what I expected. How many movies have we gotten where they say, we're going to go back and make a sequel to a comedy or another movie that happened forever ago, and they're terrible a lot of times. The Zoolander 2 and Dumb and Dumber 2, these movies have been awful. So I was excited but a little nervous when I heard that they were coming back and bringing the cast back. So I actually didn't get around to watching this until just last night. I finally was like at Walmart and I saw it on the shelf and I was like, let me go ahead and buy it. Took it home and I watched it and I laughed. I enjoyed myself. I was never bored. It was an upbeat movie, but for me, the actually best part to the movie was the younger cast. Like, it's a little depressing seeing Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves so old playing these roles. They're still trying to be like, dude, and excellent. Kind of funny, but at the same time, it's a little sad. But then they have on screen, right there, their daughters. They have Samara Weaving and Bridget Lundy Payne playing the kids, their daughters, who are also named after them. It's another, Theodore and I forget what her name is, but they're girl versions of like their names. But they played the roles so perfect. They were just like female versions of Bill and Ted from the 80s. And they were a joy to watch. It never felt forced. And I thought that the story was one that was actually worth coming back to. When you get a lot of these really late sequels, it's like it feels forced and there was no need for it. But obviously, like the trailers show, they still haven't fulfilled their destiny by writing this song. And they're in a panic because time is almost up. And where the adventure takes them, the story was great. So I absolutely love it. Have you seen this one?
I have not. Now, what I was going to ask, now I haven't seen probably the first two Bill and Ted's in 15 years, maybe. And right. So for someone like me, or maybe someone who hasn't seen them yet, because there is such a time split between the first two and this one, do you need to see both of the first two, or could someone go in cold to this one and still get enjoyment out of it, do you think?
No, I think you would still definitely get enjoyment. Would it help if you saw the first two? Sure, but the story, as wild as it is not, a complicated one. It's, I was texting my fiance, asked what I was watching, and I told her, she's like, oh, I never heard of it. And I said, oh, it's great. It's, Keanu Reeves, and he travels in a phone booth through time and reality, and he's trying to stop the end of the world by writing a rock music that'll unite the world. And she's like, that sounds ridiculous. I said, it is, but it's so much fun to watch. So, it references things from the first two movies, but you don't have to have seen them. You can catch on real quick.
You're not going to miss any crucial plot points.
No, and it's
one-off line or anything.
No, there's nothing that you're like, well, I don't get it. Why is this happening? You'll follow along just fine. But I would recommend watching the first two just because they're fun as well.
If I decide to watch this one, I might as well go back and watch the first two.
Right now, this one, like you said, this one's not streaming anywhere except for to rent. You can rent it on probably Prime and Vudu and stuff like that.
Nice. All right. So then my number 2, getting up to the top here. This one is streaming. It's a Prime original. It's Sound of Metal, and this one, based on just the basic plot description, might not think it's much of anything, but basically, a Riz Ahmed plays Ruben, a heavy metal drummer who starts going deaf, and his hearing starts deteriorating rapidly, and it's just a really intense, incredibly well acted character study on the effect it has on him, his personal life, his professional life. He's a recovering addict, so he's got, some of those other demons to work out and deal with as well. And I mean, his performance blew me away. It was just astonishing what he was able to do.
Right. Yeah.
And they brought in, actors of the deaf community as well. There's deaf actors at kind of the recovery center he goes to, kind of his mentor. I don't know, I can't remember the exact story, but I think his mentor is hearing, but his parents are deaf, I think is how it goes. So,
Okay.
he kind of knows, obviously he's well into that community.
Right.
And you hear a lot about inclusive casting, and, more often, unfortunately, you hear about films that don't go that route. And,
right.
And this is a perfect example of how much of a benefit that can be. Whether it's people who are deaf, or like in Peanut Butter Falcon, casting someone with Down syndrome to play the character with Down syndrome, and just going that extra mile, because obviously the actors are out there, they're looking for work, they can do the work, and as evidence here, they can do it extremely well. And so that just brought another, layer of authenticity to the entire feel of the film, and it's got some of the best sound work of any movie this year. Obviously sound plays a huge part. If you're a drummer, then you're going deaf, you got sound on both ends of the spectrum there. And the way the movie plays with it, what you can hear, if you're from Ruben's point of view, you kind of hear that buzz or static a little bit too. And Riz Ahmed, he wore like some sort of hearing aid that mimicked hearing loss that would get,
I was actually wondering that
would get worse and worse as, the time went on. So I don't know how extreme it got, if he went, effectively deaf with those in, or if it just got close to it. But, he went, the extra mile for it, and it paid off. It shows, he, like I said, he blew me away. If I had to pick, he'd be my choice for best actor right now. I know there's still movies to come with the goofy submission deadlines now. There's 2 more months of eligible movies to come out, but he's right at the top of that list for me.
Yeah. No, this is definitely one that was on my radar that I wanted to check out as well. But I got the feeling, and maybe you could tell me this seemed like the type of movie where I would probably have to be in the right mood to watch it. Like, it's just going to be probably really, serious, slow burn, kind of maybe not so much entertaining as it is just really well done kind of movie.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say it's a fun movie. There are fun moments and they're uplifting scenes and whatnot. But as a whole singular movie, I wouldn't say it's all that fun or entertaining.
Yeah.
But it kind of depends how you watch movies and how invested you get. I don't get a lot of too much emotions when I watch movies. Just even though I love them and I connect with them, I don't feel them in that way all that often. So, if you're more likely to, cry or tear up or get choked up, that kind of thing, then this one will have moments where it certainly, tugs at those heartstrings a little bit.
Dude, movies make me cry easy. Like, when I get invested in them, I'll cry at stupid stuff sometimes. I'm like,
that's how I know a movie really does it. If it gets me to cry, then I know they did something, out of the ordinary for me. But you might need to be in the right mindset.
But I mean, it's the one I'll definitely watch. I like movies like that. It's just might not be when I want to put on when I'm getting my coffee in the morning and sitting down to relax. So
good way to maybe an early evening, wind down a day, but then not be the last thing you watch before you go to bed.
Right. All right, man. That sounds good. Now I am going to move on to my second pick here. It is a movie called Possessor. All right. And it's kind of like what you were saying there. This is not a movie that when I'm watching it, I was like, yeah, this is fun. This is super enjoyable. But by the end, it's really one of those movies when you get to the end, it takes a minute. You got to think about it, even, for a couple hours afterward, and let everything cycle down to say, you know what, that was really well done. That story, the way it wrapped up, everything was good. So It's from Brandon Cronenberg, and if the name Cronenberg sounds familiar, it's a very unique name. That's because he is the son of acclaimed filmmaker David Cronenberg, who is known for a lot of his strange and eerie kind of horror movies. He did the Fly remake, and he's got a lot of good stuff like that under his belt, The Brood. And so this movie, while it's not a horror, I've seen things labeling it a horror online. It is not a horror. The plot is there is an assassin. Now, they don't go into explaining a lot of this corporation or who these assassins are, but there's this corporate assassin who take over another person's body, and that's how they commit their assassins. That way, it's never linked back to them. So they have these implants that get put into the person's body, take over, and the target is typically someone close to that person. So they can get close. They live this person's life who they take over for a matter of days or however long it takes, and then they commit the murder and then get out. And it reminded me actually of what we were talking about in our Wonder Woman critiques when Chris took over the body of this guy, and that nobody just paid any never mind to it, that he's taken over this guy's body and all the consequences, because it's really the same thing here, but these aren't good people. So they know exactly what they're doing, and they know what all the consequences could be. They just don't care.
Right.
They're getting paid a lot of money to take out somebody, and using this, and this is really the only science fiction element of it. It's not like in the future, there's not flying cars or holograms and stuff, but they somehow have this technology, never really goes into detail. And Sean Bean, who of course is always known for getting killed off in movies, is actually the target of who he is supposed to go assassinate. And the body that he takes over is the son-in-law of the target. He's Sean Bean's son-in-law. And so most of the movie takes place, what you can see on the trailer right here. This is the female assassin inside that body trying to get to Sean Bean to complete a kill.
Yeah, I haven't seen this one yet either, but it's definitely one for me to watch. And the description from what I've read and heard just seems like pretty wild and gnarly stuff.
Yeah, it's not done in like a traditional, maybe format of storytelling. It leans a little bit towards the art house at times, and when it is violent, it is like really violent. The gore was like extreme. Now there's not a lot of gore in it, but when they do it, they make up for it, and it is like it was like extreme. I was like, I can't believe, oh my gosh! And I watch a lot of horror movies, and I was like, like it made me grab my chest with some of this gore. But I mean, if you can stomach that kind of stuff, and you're up for one of these movies, it is available to rent on Prime right now. It's on sale for 49 cents to rent. I just pulled it up and checked. So 50 cents, it's definitely worth 50 cents to watch it. I ended up just buying it and watching it.
I think I can swing 50 cents.
Go for it, man. So what do you got to wrap us out? I'm excited to hear your final pick here.
All right. My number one movie of the year. Just saw it not even a week ago, but there's still no question in my mind. Promising Young Woman. This one, it blew me away. It was supposed to release in April, and then was one of the many movies to get delayed due to COVID, and then had a Christmas Day release. And then I ended up driving 40 miles into Wisconsin to see it. Theaters are still closed here in Minnesota. So the closest one was close enough for me. And my God, this movie, just if you don't know about it, it stars Carey Mulligan as the lead, Cassie. She's a 30, I think, year old woman. She dropped out of medical school under, dubious circumstances, which becomes clear in the movie. And she goes around at night pretending to be drunk, overly, over the top drunk, and waits for, a quote unquote nice guy to come and ask her if she's okay, try to help her out. And then they inevitably try to take advantage of her in one way or another. And then she kind of springs back to life because she's acting completely sober, and calls him out on it, and won't say more than that in terms of actually what happens. But, it's relevant to the time. They throw subtlety to the wind. They don't care about, do you understand what we're saying? They're beating you over the head with it over and over and over. So the first half of the movie is good. The second half is just absolutely next level. The performances are amazing. The theme and the tones, the music, the set designs, everything just is incredible. And what I really like about it, one of the smaller parts, is the casting, because they have a bunch of kind of big name or well-known people come in just for a few minutes at a time. They've got Carey Mulligan again in the lead role, and then Bo Burnham probably has the next most prominent role. But then they've got Laverne Cox, Allison Brie, Alfred Molina, Adam Brody, Max Greenfield, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, Sam Richardson, Molly Shannon, Jennifer Coolidge, Connie Britton. I mean, every single person that I just named off has been in one or more iconic movies or shows over the course of their careers. And they come in just for a few minutes and then they're gone. A couple of them come back, for a bit part again. And, it's really fun to see these people just basically say, hey, I want to be a part of a good and important and relevant movie. The visceral reaction that I had to this movie is nothing like I've had in any movie I can remember in recent years. Even last year, Parasite, which we talked about briefly before, I think that's an 100 out of 100 perfect movie. I didn't have a reaction like that in Parasite similar to what I did with Promising Young Woman. There's a part near the end where my jaw just hit the floor, and it stayed there for the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie, stayed there as I walked out of the theater, stayed there on the beginning of the car ride home, just stunned that it did what it did. And I mean, I don't really know what else to say. Part of it, I mean, without going into full-on spoilers, because there are some predictable moments, but there are some twists and turns that you just don't see coming, and it just smacks you over the head with it. And some people don't like the third act, and I can see where that would lose some people, but it worked to perfection for me. And, even if you don't like the third act that much, you're going to like the first parts of the movie so much probably that you can only drop it down, just a little bit probably. But this one, I am so glad I saw this one right
I'm
away.
glad you got to see it too. Now, this was a movie I already wanted to see, but I'm so much more excited to see it now. And I would say, out of your list, the only one I had seen on your list was Palm Springs, which I absolutely loved. But I know your taste and our tastes usually align, and I trust your opinions. This is the one I'm most excited out of your movies to see. I'm really psyched for this one.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And anytime you do an intense string version of Britney Spears' Toxic, I was on board just off that alone in the trailer, and it only gets better from there.
Now, a few years back, there was this straight to video. Like I said, I'm like a horror hound, so this wasn't a good movie by any means, but I did watch it. This straight to video horror thriller called Nurse, and the plot was very similar. It was this nurse who would pretend to be drunk, go to parties, and then when guys tried to take advantage of her, she just killed them, on the spot. So, but this sounds like a much better done version of that, because that one was not very good.
Yeah, that's not what I'm familiar with, but it sounds like there's definitely some correlation and similarities between that, what's it called, Nurse that you just mentioned, and Promising Young Woman. But yeah, it leans into some expectations, it subverts some expectations, and this is one. If it was in theaters in Minnesota, I don't see movies in theaters twice very often.
Right.
This is one I definitely would. Don't know that I'd drive 40 miles for a second viewing.
Right.
But there's a second, third, fourth, fifth viewing down the line, no question.
The movie that I saw most in theaters, I think I went 3 times for No Country for Old Men.
Yep, that's if you're gonna pick one, that's not a bad one to do it on.
But yeah, I don't see them twice super often. But yeah, I saw that 3 times. I saw Blade Runner 2049 twice, and I watched The Shape of Water twice.
Okay. The last one I did, and this is kind of embarrassing, was actually Age of Ultron.
Oh,
I saw it twice in theaters in the same day.
Really?
I went in the morning by myself, and then my roommate wanted to see it, so we went again at night.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I mean, I love the Avengers movies, but, you kind of pick any of the it's just the weakest one. Yeah. But it is what it is.
I saw it in theaters. I don't think I've watched it since, not even on TV or DVD or anything.
Yeah. I tend to like it more than most, I think, but as far as the Avengers movies and the greater MCU, it's probably right in the mid pack.
Alrighty. Well, let's move on to my finale here. Not only was this my favorite movie of the year, this is my favorite movie that I have seen in a long time. Like it's up there in my tops. I mean, well, Parasite's there too. I'm not saying this is better than Parasite, but this is a movie that could easily find its way at the top of my movie lists of all time, not just for this year. And it is another French movie called Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Yep.
Now, what kind of audience this is open to? It's, an 18th century French a romantic drama. So its audience, the general audiences might not be flocking to see it, but it is so well done. You know how I said, like, I get emotional in movies. This one had me emotional multiple times throughout. And the plot is there's a woman, this Duchess, and her mother who live in this, little castle here on the water. Their father, her father's dead. It's just her and the mother, and pretty much they're running out of money, and she is to be married off to somebody of wealth and power, which is what the mother's pushing to get the family back on track. The requirement is the guy who is going to marry her has to see a portrait of her first. He wants to make sure he's not getting someone ugly. So they have to bring in this artist to paint her, but she does not want to get married off. So she refuses to let anyone paint her portrait. So they hire this woman to come in and pretend not to be a painter, just to take walks with her and be a friend, and has to paint her by memory. Looking at her, goes back to her room and paints at night. But as they take these long walks and she, they form a bond that turns into kind of a forbidden romance between these two women in the 18th century, which was, not acceptable at the time or, for her family. And they form this bond right as she's about to be married off and sent off. So, it is just a really well done character study of, relationships and the power of love. And it's really well done.
Yeah, this is one that I caught last year, actually. And I mean, the intensity of some of those, one-on-one moments is, kind of unmatched a little bit in recent memory. Now, if I have the details right, what are your thoughts on the fact that, so for the international Oscar, other countries submit one movie for consideration, and France actually submitted Les Miserables instead of Portrait of a Lady on Fire for their Best Picture candidate.
See, now I wasn't even aware of that, because I wonder how was this movie so overlooked, because not only was it really well done, it's a type of movie that the Oscars, look to. It was, a drama about, forbidden things and stuff like that. And the Oscars usually eat that up. So that's an interesting point. I didn't know that. I mean, I can't fault them for putting, Les Miserables. I love that movie, but I think Portrait of a Lady on Fire would have been a better shot for them for sure.
Yeah, I know some of the discourse was that most people still would have predicted Parasite to win, but that if Portrait had been instead of Les Mis, it maybe wouldn't have been as sure of a thing. And then especially with Parasite ultimately winning Best Picture, maybe Portrait would have gotten that international nod. But just want to get your thoughts on that. On how close do you have those two? Like, are they pretty even, or is Portrait a few steps above?
Above which one?
Above Les Mis, the French.
It's hard to say because they're completely different movies. We talk about what's a fun watch and enjoyable watch. I really enjoyed watching Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I was never bored. You say an 18th century, French romance and people are like, ugh, but I was never bored. You get really invested in the characters. This one is a character study in that sense. And Les Miserables is too, because it's about, the characters, about doing what's right and what's standing up for what's right and abuse of power and all that. But that one, I think for mainstream audiences, at least, would be the more entertaining and easy to watch, because it implements, a little bit of action. It has thriller elements, suspense, and people just love a good, cop crime movie. And this has that. So,
yeah.
And do you have any final thoughts or a last little honorable mention you just wanted to throw out real quick?
Maybe one or two honorable mentions. One is an HBO Max documentary, Class Action Park.
Oh yeah.
And so have you seen this one?
Yeah.
Yep. So it's about a water park in New Jersey called Action Park, and it kind of goes through the history of it and how mismanaged it was, how dangerous it was, how much ownership just didn't care about like the safety or quality of the rides. And they've got people, some residents, some celebrities, some just former residents and employees talking about their experiences at the park, and it's hysterical.
Yeah.
You know, obviously there's some terrible things happen at that park, but the way that people talk about it, like it's this huge mythological creation that almost seems completely made up. And
it's one of those things, if you had the chance to go there, you're like a part of, like, you could say, yeah, I was there at this crazy place. You're like, that's a story you can tell forever.
Yeah, I was there and I survived is what the story is. And I mean, if you've got HBO Max, I don't know if it's on HBO proper, but Max is, you know, on all platforms now, I think, or all streaming devices.
Yeah.
If you've got it, it's probably only hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. So it's an easy watch, super fun. And, you know, I think it's probably in like the 70s or 80s. And it's just like, oh yeah, that was the culture back then. It's a great time. It's a great watch.
All right. Well, I'll throw out a quick honorable mention. I'm going to do this one called Come to Daddy, because it is just Elijah Wood doing his indie weird stuff that's all he does now. Elijah Wood finds these little indie movies. They're quirky characters, and that's his honey spot. He does great at it. And so this one is, I don't even know how old Elijah Wood is. Got to be in his upper 30s now. So
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so he's this upper 30-year-old guy with like a dorky little mustache, has, you know, collared shirts tucked into his pants, and he never knew his dad. So he goes to meet his dad for the first time. And when he gets there, his dad is just a madman, like crazy. And he starts to thinking like, oh, my dad doesn't seem at all like I expected. Like, he seems like insane. And his dad's just insane. So it's that moment there. It's dark humor with a little bit of thriller thrown in, but the thriller never overtakes the humor. It's more of a light, comical kind of crazy movie. So definitely check that out. That is on Amazon Prime, I believe.
Nice. Yeah, I remember seeing that one, or the trailer for it, months back, and then I just let it get pushed down the list. But that one always seemed pretty, you know, interesting and wild a little bit too.
Yeah, it is for sure.
Nice.
Well, all right. I think that we got a pretty good list here. I definitely got some movies that I want to watch based off of yours. Maybe you'll end up watching some off of mine.
Yep, same for me for sure.
Yeah, so you guys can find me at Mr. Movie Guy 86. That's on Instagram and Twitter. And Matt, where can we find you?
Instagram and Twitter as well, at Matt Hambidge.
All right, guys, that's where you can find us. Be sure to follow us. We are always talking movies, updating on, you know, pop culture, TV, movies, all that stuff. Hit us up with your questions, and we will see you guys next week. Should be back on Thursday. And for next week, since we did best movies of 2020 this time, next week we are going to be looking at the most anticipated movies of 2021. It's a clean slate. 2020 is finally done. We're washing it clean. We're moving on, and we have the movies that we are looking forward to. So